What's up, everybody? We're back. Football Night in America podcast. We got the one and only Jason Garrett here. And why wouldn't we? We're about to talk quarterbacks, all the good stuff. You know a little bit about playing quarterback, right, JG?
Yeah, I'd like to think so. We've evaluated a few of these guys through the years, Dev. It's definitely an exciting time.
Yeah, man. I think it's so interesting because everybody goes crazy. It's ups and downs. This guy's here. This guy's projected. He's climbing. He's falling. So let's jump right in. Caleb Williams, really the consensus number one pick for the Chicago Bears. I'm not a quarterback guru. I know what was hard playing against quarterbacks. I know guys that were mobile enough to get around the pocket, can hurt you with their legs when they run, but can stand in the pocket and throw any ball that you want, but also can move and on the go throw balls pretty well too. And that's what it seems like Caleb Williams is. The interesting thing to me is all of the extra talk around this guy. It's just like, he's so talented. We've been hearing that for, the last 2 years. People argue that he might have been the first pick last year's draft. And then now I always feel like when a guy's about to get drafted, people like go on this deep dive, like, we got to find something wrong. He's too perfect. So whether it's a basketball game and whether his fingernails are painted or not painted, or the color of his phone case, or he's a diva because he's decided not to do physicals at the combine. It's just all of these things come into play because we have time. But I think it all comes down to, is the guy a good football player, and is he going to be a good teammate? And from the guys at USC that have talked about him, seems like they loved him in the locker room. He was the guy at quarterback. And I know from playing defense, when you play on teams where you don't have a quarterback that can go win games, I don't care about the attitude, how much he works, you're devastated when you get a stop and there's a minute and 40 left in the game and the offense takes a field and you sit on the bench and you're like, well, that's the day, guys. We lost this one because we're definitely not going down to kick a field goal or score a touchdown. And I think that plays a bigger part than anything.
Come on, man. You had the opposite your whole career. You had the guy that with 1:20 to go was always taking you down to win. It's a huge topic. It really is. And, you're not going to win in the NFL if you don't have a great quarterback. It's as simple as that. There are 10 teams in the league who have a chance to go to the playoffs and go all the way every year. You know why? Because they got elite quarterbacks, and everybody else, they're hoping and praying and all that, but they're not going to do it. And digging into this thing, it's a big conversation. It's a huge decision for these teams. I used to say it was a 10-year decision. I'm not sure it's a 10-year decision anymore. It might be a 6-7-year decision. If you're at the top of the draft and you choose one of these guys, this is the direction you're going in. He's going to be the leader of your team. He's going to play. It's hard not to play him right away. Even though the Mahomes example, Mahomes sits for a year and then he plays, people don't seem to be drawn to that. They say, hey, we drafted him this high. Let's go. Let's play him. So he's going to be the face of your franchise. And there's a lot that goes into the decision, obviously. This is the most missed decision in the NFL year in and year out. Yep. There's a lot of hype that comes around the guys that are the top quarterbacks in their draft class, and they get pushed up to the top of the draft. And those teams that don't have one feel compelled to take one. So they miss a lot. The physical factors are easy to evaluate. How big is he? How fast is he? How he throws it? All of those things, anybody can see them. The harder part of the evaluation is the other stuff. And the other stuff is the stuff that separates quarterbacks from each other. There's been a lot of guys who are prototypes. They used to say, take an erector set and build the guy. He's 6'4", he's 220 pounds, he's this, he's that, he's the other thing. There's a lot of those guys that have been drafted high that have not worked out. So it's finding the other traits. I hate to keep going back to your guy, pick 199 in the year 2000. We used to laugh about that combine picture, and they would put it up every year, and I would say, hey, stop laughing, right? This is the best one that ever walked. Mm-hmm. And everyone is getting caught up in all the wrong stuff. Easy to see how tall, fast. I got it. Okay. What's the stuff that makes the guy great? And to me, it's all line one has been instincts, mental and physical toughness. all the great quarterbacks that I've been around, and really probably the great players, if you think about it,
Yep.
they have an instinct for the game. They have a feel for the game. And then they're mentally and physically tough. And then you say, okay, now he's big, he's fast, he's strong, he can throw it, all those things. If you have those first two, then you start getting into the physical traits, and that's what separates the Hall of Famer and then the other guy. So they're all different shapes and sizes. Look at the NFL now. You got guys who are 5'10", guys who are 6'4". You know, it's all over the map in terms of what they look like. The question is, are they instinctive? Do they have a feel for playing the position? And then are they mentally and physically tough to be their best when they need to? Because it's the hardest position in the NFL. It's the most scrutinized position in the NFL. So when you dig into Caleb Williams, I announced the Notre Dame USC game last year.
Mhm.
And I'm watching, I watch 8 games of Caleb Williams. I've seen a ton of them on TV. Now I'm watching him to prepare for the game. Excited to watch him. I can't wait to put the tape on. This guy's incredible. And I watched him. I'm like, I don't see anybody in any way stop this guy. I mean, they try different. They play man, they play zone, they blitz, they do this, they do that, they do the other thing. He figures it out, makes plays. His instincts are off the charts. Vision, feel, people around him, throw it hard, throw it soft. I mean, I was like, I couldn't believe how good he was. I'm in the meetings with Marcus Freeman and Al Golden, the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. And Al starts into, hey, we got a rush plan for this guy. And, we're going to force him to his left, and we're going to bring the twist over here. And then we're going to do this, and we're going to spy this guy late. And I'm sitting there like nodding my head like, yeah, everybody's got a damn rush plan against this guy. He runs out of the back of the pocket and throws the ball down the field. I mean, nobody stopped him. And then the game started, and they did have a rush plan, and they had a coverage plan. And he threw 3 interceptions early on in this game and was completely disoriented. And then he wasn't as good after that. And then there were some chinks in the armor, like, how's he handling this situation or that situation? So it was interesting to me to see how he navigated all that stuff. Having said all that, I think he's the best quarterback of the group. He's going to go first, and I think he's got a chance to be a great NFL player because he has those instincts. There's a lot of stuff around him. I've never talked to him. I've never had a conversation with him. I don't know him at all. You read a lot of different stuff like you talked about. I think you have to dig into some of that stuff, but I don't think you get overly enamored with it. You want your players to have personality. You want them to bring their personality to the team. You certainly want your quarterback to have personality. You want him to be himself. You don't want him to be robotic in any way. So that's what he brings to the table. I don't think anybody questions his instincts. Nobody questions his physical toughness, his mental toughness, his ability. It's all over the place. Is he a developing quarterback? Absolutely. Is he going to see a lot of looks in the NFL like he saw with Al Golden and Notre Dame? Absolutely. Is he going to have to navigate after the snap, progressing the right way, seeing it, and not just defaulting to running the ball? Absolutely. Those are all areas where he's got to improve. But I think he's a dynamic player. I think he's a rare physical talent, and I do think he has that other stuff. So I think Chicago's going to take him. He's going to be their quarterback for a long time.
Yeah, and I think that's the fun part of this draft process, because so many people outside of what's going on talk to, like you just said, they're probably just like you, never sat down and talked to him, never probably even got close to him, but then have all these very strict and direct opinions. And that, to me, is the bad part about this process of there's way too many cooks in the kitchen with an opinion on a guy that doesn't even take the time to get to know him. So I agree with you. I think Chicago's a team that has made a lot of moves, and now they're all sitting there waiting. They're waiting for this guy to get drafted. They're waiting to now welcome him with open arms. And I think that's going to create a different dynamic. And other teams, it's like, we have this one guy who's going to come in and he has to save the day without any help. Like we look at Washington and the Commanders. You have a new owner. You have a new GM. You have a new head coach. You have all this going on. This young quarterback that comes, everything's on you now. The whole fate, not just of this one franchise, of all these new people who have just come in. They're now putting all that on you. And I think they have the hardest pick in this draft. I think Caleb Williams has been the consistent number one guy this whole time. And then it's been Jayden Daniels and Drake Maye, and they've kind of bounced back and forth. And then JJ McCarthy has come kind of shooting up the draft board that maybe he's in the conversation. And I think now the pressure goes on Washington because now whoever you decide to pick, it's going to be, well, you should have went and then got this guy, or you should have got that guy. So I look at them as having the most pressure. How do you feel about the rest of these guys? Who's the clear-cut number two to you?
Well, it's a great question. I've dug into it. I've watched a lot of the tape on both of them. I've talked to a lot of people who have talked to the guys, and by all accounts, fantastic kids who love football, smart, can pick it up, all of that. So it doesn't seem to be like there's any red flags with anybody else in this group. I couldn't believe how good Jayden Daniels was when I put the tape on. You know, we get into the season and we see highlights of guys, or I see a quarter and a half of an LSU game, or you see this, it's bits and pieces of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wow, this kid must be pretty good. 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He wins the Heisman, you know? And so then I dive into the tape and I couldn't believe how refined he was. He's got elite athleticism. He's tall and lean. The one thing that concerns you a little bit is that he's slight, but you'd rather have him be slight at this age where they can develop than too big, where you got to thin him out. So that doesn't really bother me. He's got a big frame. I think he'll be plenty big enough to play the position over the course of his career. Athleticism off the charts, ability to run. He's not Lamar Jackson, but boy, some of the runs he makes, I'm like, damn, is this guy good? You know? But where I was so impressed with him was efficiency with his feet, efficiency with his stroke, ability to throw different kinds of balls. He can drive the ball. He can lay the ball, like layer it over the linebacker, throw a deep over route, throw it in cut, you know, where he's got to put it over somebody before his safety. I thought he threw with timing and anticipation. I thought his touch on fades and stuff down by the goal line was really good. And I think it goes back to his emphasis on his footwork. I talked to Mike Denbrock, who's the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame now, who was his offensive coordinator the last couple of years at LSU. And he said his biggest step was to refine his footwork and try to develop as a pocket passer who can progress. Okay. Number one's not there, I take off. That was him 2 years ago. Now number one's not there. I go to 2, I go to 3, I find the check down. Oh, number one's not there. 2, I get pressured. I go make a 20-yard run. So he's shown that he can make a big run. Where he's developed is the efficiency, the being more fundamentally sound with his feet and with his arm, and then the ability to go through progressions. And you see it every week against the best competition in the country. So when I put that tape on, I was like, wow. I was really impressed. I had kind of heard the hype. I had seen flashes of it, but week in and week out, pretty darn impressive. Drake Maye, for me, was a little less impressive on tape. He certainly didn't have that wow year. Now, the first thing that somebody would say is, well, he doesn't have 2 first-round receivers, and he doesn't have this, and he's playing all of that. And I get that. He does have some similar traits in that he can throw it. He can throw it short, deep, drive it, lay it. He can get out of trouble with his feet. Number of plays that he made just simply escaping in big moments. It was really impressive. I thought he was a little more inconsistent throwing the ball. He had some misses. It's like he has an out route that he should make. He throws it over the guy's head. You're like, you know, he's too good to have that miss. Having said that, that's something as a coach you say, got it. He's still young. We can get him there. You know, these quarterbacks have a longer runway now, and they can grow and develop their arm efficiency, their accuracy as they go. So that wouldn't be a red flag. One of the things that's so impressive about him is people love him as a kid, and his football intelligence apparently is off the charts. That they really think he's a smart guy who picks things up very quickly. So for me, those 2 guys are the next 2. From the tape that I watched, I like Jayden Daniels better. I'd be surprised if the Commanders didn't take him first. And then it goes back to your old team at number 3, New England. Do they take Drake Maye, or does someone come up into that spot? It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think for me, as I was watching deep dive in these cornerbacks and seeing Jayden Daniels, because every team I want to watch the corner in the SEC, the first thing I did was, did you play against LSU? Because they do have these receivers. They have 3 receivers who are really good players. So that stuck out to me of Jayden Daniels getting the ball to these guys in so many different locations. Neighbors is all over the field. Thomas is all over the field. So the ability to know where these guys are, to get them the ball. And then what I love from watching them is a lot of times young quarterbacks, we talk about always usually escaping out the back of the pocket. Everything's like, all right, the pressure's coming. I'm going to use my athleticism in college to either spin out or give 5 to 10 yards and then take off because they won't catch me. You can't do that in the NFL. You do that against some of these defensive ends or outside linebackers. You think you're going to give ground, they're running you down instantly. And that's some of the best athletes you'll see at quarterback still will get ran down. Jayden Daniels, I saw a lot of times stepping up in those B gaps, stepping up between that guard and tackle and saying, hey, it's open. And now instead of losing yards, I'm 15 yards down the field before you know it. And that creates so many issues. Like as I'm watching the film, all I hear is Coach Belichick in my ear. We can't give up the inside of the pocket. Like that's suicide. And because it's true, it kills defenses. So, and I thought Drake Maye is like you said, a bigger kid. He's able to move the ball and get the ball in different places. But I think that's the hard thing. I think sometimes you don't have as good of a year because you're trying to do more. All that pressure comes on you. It's you and Caleb Williams, and then Jayden Daniels is coming there. It's like, how do I prove I'm number one? How do I go do that week in and week out? And I might not have that necessary talent. So I'm always anxious to see when these guys get into a building, a facility, and now everything's going to be built around them. It's not just about NIL deals and who's able and how do we recruit and get a guy here. Now, like we're going to go draft a guy and say, hey, this guy's going to play with you because we drafted him, or we're going to pay for a guy to come here. So that to me always helps guys out. But even my conversations, you mentioned the Patriots at number 3. I think it's real for the Patriots that if they do get some type of deal that they love, and I know everybody's like, well, what is a deal that you love? I think for them, it's not going to be just picks. I think they have such a deficit over the last few years of just going out there and winning football games and putting a talented enough roster out there to compete for championships. I think this team will be better, obviously, than it was last year when you only won 4 games. That's not saying much. But the problem is the culture in New England, because of Coach Belichick, is you win a Super Bowl or you don't. That's the definition of a good season. That, yes, they're not going to be Super Bowl or bust, but I think they have to be in the playoffs. They want to get back to that level. And I think for them, if they can get 2 or 3 first-round picks plus a player like Darrisaw in Minnesota, the left tackle, they can get him. Yes, then I think they're like, hey, Minnesota, Kevin O'Connell, you want to move up to number 3? Give us a starting left tackle that we can go out there and say, we now have the tackle for the next 5 to 10 years on our roster. Go ahead, because so far that's been a problem for them. And I think they've patched together a good enough offensive line, bringing Michael Penix back this year. I think that'll help. But I think they still have to have question marks there. And I think left tackle and wide receiver, but I just don't see Minnesota coming in saying, hey, take Justin Jefferson off our hands and give us picks. I think that would be crazy. So I think the next step for them is how do we solidify our offensive line? And I think if not, if they don't get a trade offer that they love, then to me, they have probably the best position of maybe you don't get the guy that you might have rated a little higher than the other guy, but you don't have to make this choice. So you get the third best guy. But if you can work with a Drake Maye or a Jayden Daniels, that's pretty good in this draft to say we got the third best guy, but they're not far off from the guy in front of us, because we saw it in years past. That could be a huge drop-off depending on who's available. So I think they're in a good position and very interested in what they do draft night.
Yeah, it always comes back to the evaluation of the player. And oftentimes people talk about the strategy of the draft, move back, get picks, all of that. I got it. I understand it. I understand how it's all weighted. I understand you get more players. I got all that stuff. But if you love the player and you have conviction on the player, take the player. Nobody's going to remember, oh, you took him third, or you took him this, or we got this. If you drafted a Hall of Fame player, the conversation's over. And so, and we had that situation a number of different times where you say, okay, I got a little pang about the guy. Let's go back. I have conviction about the guy. Let's take the guy. I don't care what we're getting. This guy is better than that guy. Those picks don't add up to it. Let's take the guy. And to me, that's what it comes down to. If they love whoever it is, Drake Maye, if he's the guy available, do they love him, or do they, yeah, it'd be nice to have him. I think that's what drives the decision, or should drive the decision more than anything else.
When you have the number 3 pick, or you're so high, do you have a sense that you kind of fall in love with a guy because of time goes on and you need that quarterback? Or were you always able to just kind of be like, I'm going to be objective. Do I love him? Do I not? And then move on. Or is it hard, like going to dinner with the guy and all of those other aspects that come into play?
For me, it was always the goal of the draft was to don't make it about position need. If you built the team the right way, be as pure as you can be on draft day to draft the best players. Now, that's easier said than done. It's hard to do when you have a big hole at tackle and their tackles are staring at you. Consciously or subconsciously, those guys get pushed up in your mind. But we did our best when we really pulled back and said, who's the best guy? Who's the elite player? Who's the Pro Bowl player? Who's the potential Hall of Fame player when you're at the top of the draft? And so that's what you have to really force yourself to do. Check yourself on it, because that draft for need thing blends with best player real easily, because you look at the makeup of your roster. And so we drafted Tyron Smith with the 9th pick of the draft my first year in 2011. And we had opportunities to go back. We had a lot of conversations about the other tackles in the draft. We just said, at the end of it, I got it. That all makes sense. On this little chart, yeah, I get the numbers. Yeah, this guy's better. This guy's better. Let's take this guy. This guy's going to be a Hall of Fame tackle for us. This guy's going to start on day one, and we're not going to have to address this thing for 12 years. Ended up being 13. He made about 9 Pro Bowls, and to me, was the best left tackle of his generation. And so I was happy with the conviction that we had. He was the first player we drafted when I was the head coach, and it was like he represented everything we wanted. And that conviction that we had about him, I don't even know what all the draft options were. We could go back to 14 instead of drafting at 9, and we get this, and that. Forget all that. Let's take this guy. If you don't have that conviction, those trades become, hey, let's go. I want to wheel and deal. And I think that for New England, for Arizona, for the Giants, all those guys that are way up at the top of the draft, that's what you have to think about. And if you can take the position thing out of it, if Marvin Harrison's staring at you, you're like, I know we have a need at position X. Are you kidding me? If Joe Walt's staring at you, I know we have a need. This guy's going to be our tackle until 2038, And so I think that's how you have to think all the time, but particularly in those top 10 picks.
No, that makes sense. And you mentioned the Giants, and you have some crossover with Daniel Jones, and was talking to Logan Ryan on here last week, and he was a guy, he was like, they got to go get another quarterback. He said, DJ's been great. He's a hard worker. He's a good guy. People love to root for him, but he felt like his ability to be available wasn't there. And he talked about they should move on and get the next guy, but he felt like it just can't be JJ McCarthy. Where for me, I was like, the Giants right now are outside of those top 3 guys, those guys that everyone feels really good about. So I looked at it as, all right, you replace Daniel Jones and you change the name, but you might still get the same quality of player in Daniel Jones that will now take over a team that has the same needs that you said they had when Daniel Jones was your quarterback. So for me, I looked at the Giants, I was like, they're at number 6. I don't know if they're in love with a guy enough to give away some of the things that they already have in their franchise, whether it be picks or players, to move up, if they really feel like that guy will change everything about their team. I think Daniel Jones has been a good enough quarterback that, hey, let's just add more around him. I don't even think we had this conversation if Daniel Jones wasn't making $40 million. I think his contract and what he makes has made people more say, let's get involved. Let's talk about this guy not being there. Yes, we want him to be healthy and all of that. But I think, a year before he's in the playoffs, they go to Minnesota, they win in Minnesota. He's running the ball, he's throwing the ball, he's doing all these different things. And it was like, okay, like that's why they paid him. So to me, it's like, give the guy another opportunity to go out there and compete, make your team better. Like you just said, get the best player available to help your team go win football games and then go. I just think when you go and get another quarterback, you just reset everything. And Maher has already come out and said he's all for this team and Joe Shane and Brian Daboll going out there and doing whatever they feel necessary, even that means getting a quarterback. But he added the but I really like Daniel Jones. So that told me, it was like, hey, I hired you guys to do what you do, but if you're wrong, I have no problem probably firing you too. So it's going to be very interesting for the Giants at 6, because I think they should like what they have with Daniel Jones for right now and make this team better.
I love DJ. I was with him for a couple of years with the Giants, and he's one of my favorite people that I've ever met in football. I think he's a really talented guy. I think he's been in a really bad situation his whole career. I really do. I don't think he's had a consistent chance to succeed because of the environment that he's been in. And one of the things that we always try to do when we're evaluating quarterbacks, but really every position, is be careful of making the evaluation in the draft only about that year. Put Daniel Jones in this draft. Put Drake Maye in last year's draft. How do they stack up? How do they stack up against Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Tua? And so if you had all these guys coming out, and you have to be honest with yourself about how we thought about that guy then. Everyone thinks Justin Herbert, I had him, I knew. Well, let's go back and let's just be honest. The only way we're going to be good at this is if we're honest on what we thought. We have to say, yeah, I did think that, but I also thought this. These were my reservations. This is why I liked him better than this guy. So if you can put the guys in the same draft class. So the question would be, when Daniel was coming out and you had him with Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, Drake Maye, J.J. McCarthy, where would you have put him? Where would he have stacked up? Are you getting the same guy? Are you getting a tall, lean, athletic guy from the state of North Carolina who makes a lot of plays with his feet, who's really smart, tough, loves, it sounds like an evaluation that's pretty similar, So the reason, having some experience and being around and having some history really helps you evaluate better if you're honest with yourself. And so I think that's the big question the Giants have to ask. Okay, what did we think of Daniel coming out? Has he been what we thought? Where did we make mistakes in that evaluation? And then if we stuck him into this class, where would you put him? Because if you're getting the same guy, I agree with your point that, hey, okay, now you're just swapping this position and the team hasn't gotten any better. If it's going to be real similar, we already have this investment. He's experienced. He's still young. He's still got all his physical tools. He's been banged up. That's real. He's missed too much time in his career. I get that. But he has so many great qualities. Why not get the team better? Why not get the offensive line better? Why not get the playmakers around him? So I think those are the questions they have to go through. And the question is at 6, but now you say, okay, we got to go up to 3. What's that going to cost us? Yes. So if we're swapping out for the same guy, and then we're getting worse because we're not drafting how we can draft because we gave picks away or we have to give a player away, it's a tricky little evaluation for them. They better really, really love the player to go move and get them.
Jason, if you watch me on any more draft shows leading up to this draft, I am definitely stealing that. Put the guy in the draft with everybody else. Where do you rank him? I don't think people talk about that enough when you watch this draft stuff. It's just comparison to guys in the draft. Maybe they mention a guy from a comparison standpoint. He's like this, but there's never a thought or anyone talk about put all these guys together. Where do you rank them? I think that's an awesome point.
And the biggest part of it is be honest. Because when the guy fails in the NFL, all of a sudden, I hated this guy. I never liked that guy, or boy, he was my sleeper. I'm like, yeah. I was in those meetings, sleeper my ass, So you got to be honest with yourself and with each other, or else it doesn't work. But I always felt like that was a valuable tool.
Yeah, and I think the next team is the Vikings. I feel like their name has come up a lot about moving up. And I think obviously it's because they had a guy. They had Kirk Cousins, and whatever people think about Kirk Cousins, if he got paid too much or whatever it is, I'd rather be overpaid than underpaid any day of the week. If I'm Kirk Cousins, I'm going by the market. If the market tells me I'm worth 180, damn it, Kirk Cousins, go get 180. And you can't find a better guy to give $180 million to. So but now the Vikings have this huge hole. You lose Kirk Cousins, you lose a guy that was able to get the ball to all these dynamic playmakers, and you still bring back Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, who had great years last year, and you still have Hawkinson. So you have these guys, but now everybody's sitting there like, are they really going to have Sam Darnold throw the ball? And it's very interesting because Sam Darnold was this guy that was done. He was in New York, and it was like, why did they draft this guy? He's done in the NFL. He slowly goes to Carolina. Then he goes to San Francisco. He's a backup last year in San Francisco, has a pretty solid year when he gets to start a game at the end of the year. They talked about over and over when Brock Purdy got hurt. They just talked about this guy's development. We really like Sam Darnold. And I like to see these stories. I like to see guys come in and it doesn't work out, but they just keep adding. I got a chance to talk to Sam Darnold. We had joint practices in Carolina against Carolina in 2022. And we just run into each other in the hallway in the tunnel. And he straight up asked me, he goes, what'd you see from me? What's some things I could do better? And it caught me off guard. Like I had no previous relationship with him other than him being on the Jets and us playing him twice a year. And we sat in a tunnel and we just chopped it up real quick of what I saw from playing a safety position and what he was doing. And I was like, man, this guy is really heading towards trying to get better and doing whatever he has to do to try to be a good quarterback in this league. And I'm interested to see because I think the Vikings have some pieces that now every other team that's in the top three, they're looking and they're like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to give up a Justin Jefferson? Do you want to give up a Darrisaw? Are you willing to get rid of some of these blue chip players you have? And I wonder, does Minnesota say, hey, like we had a chance to bring Kirk Cousins back. We let Kirk Cousins go into free agency. We have a plan all along. And I don't necessarily think it is to move up to go to number 3. I think they might really believe that with the weapons they have, with Brian Flores coming back on the defense, coming on the defense this year, and what the jumps and the leaps they were able to do going from, practically almost last in the NFL to, up there in the middle tier. I think they might sit there and say, if we just improve our defense a little bit better, maybe bring in somebody else, a guy or two on offense, we still can compete and be front runners in this league because we did it without Kirk Cousins and a bunch of different quarterbacks. So I think they have a plan that everyone else doesn't really see it.
Yeah. First off, I love that about the NFL. I love that conversation you had with him. I love the fact that, this is a guy who obviously heralded coming out, high pick, but he's not really interested in that. He's interested in getting better. He's honest enough with himself to say, hey, I got to figure this out. Why not talk to a guy like Devin McCourty, who's been there, who's played at the highest level, and to get that feedback and then your willingness to share with him your thoughts. To me, that's what makes the NFL special. I love that. Oftentimes you see that within a team, but to see that, when you're competitors, I think that's fantastic. So I appreciate you sharing that story. I've always liked Sam Darnold, and we talked about instincts earlier, and I thought he had fantastic instincts coming out. There were some physical things, some fundamental things that I was concerned about. He had a little bit of a loopy stroke where it took him a little time to get the ball out of his hand, but it was smooth and natural. And, I thought his movement in the pocket, his movement to get out of the pocket, throwing under duress, all those things, I thought they were really good. Now, he got those things tested a lot early on in his career because his environment was horrendous. And, so sometimes that can happen to quarterbacks. They come in and they have tools enough to do it, but they're in such a bad environment that you just get shell-shocked and they lose that whatever that innocence is that you need to play well. And, I think for a couple of years, he was finding himself. I don't think the story is that unlike Baker Mayfield. right?
Mhm.
Baker Mayfield, the first player taken. He has some success, has some adversity. He goes away. He's on this team. He's on that team. Now he's on this team. And all of a sudden, what people liked in Baker Mayfield coming out, is still there. And he unearths it.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, he's the quarterback down in Tampa, leading them to the playoffs. So I don't think that Minnesota feels like that story is that far off for them and Sam Darnold. Talented guy coming out. There's a lot of great stories in NFL history of resurrected high-pick quarterbacks going somewhere else and getting a new start, a better environment, and they take advantage of it. So I like that move. I think Sam's been out of the spotlight a little bit and maybe has a chance to regain some of his confidence. And I do believe because your old teammate played till he was 45, I do think the runway for quarterbacks is a lot longer. So the guy's 26, 27, 28 years old. He gets a new chance. He still has the physical ability. He's learning. He's in a better environment. That can happen. Having said that, I do think that Minnesota wants to get what they think is their next quarterback. I would be shocked if they went from 11 to 3 and went and got one of these guys, because I feel like the price is really high. You mentioned Justin Jefferson a couple times. I would lay in front of the train tracks before I let that happen, right? This guy's a generational player. This guy is, he's not Jerry Rice, but I mean, he's on this path to Rice and Moss and all these elite players. Do not let that guy ever get out of the building, right? I understand the importance of the quarterback, but there's a lot of risk involved. There's no risk involved with him. Keep him there. You mentioned the tackle. I could see that. Left tackles are hard to come by. I get it. If you're really convicted about it, okay. But still, that's a heavy price to pay because you're giving up this first-round pick and that first-round pick and a ton of other stuff. So I don't know that I see these guys as slam dunk players that you have to go get. John Elway's coming out in 1983. It's like, John Elway, go get him. This guy is going to be the greatest that ever walked, right? So I don't know that these guys are like that. And that's why it's important to go back and evaluate them relative to the other guys in other drafts. Who's the elite guy coming out? How does he stack up? Is this just the best of the class, or is he more of a 5-year player, generational type player? Those are the questions you got to ask. So I like what Minnesota did getting Darnold. I still think they want a quarterback. I'd be surprised if they gave up too much to go up all the way to 3. There are other guys than those top 3 guys. J.J. McCarthy, Penix, Nix, those are interesting players as well.
And that's what I think is interesting. I think because as we move on to these next teams, talking about the Broncos and the Raiders, everybody can't trade up. And I think some of these teams now will look at the Bo Nixes of the world, the Michael Penix Juniors. They will look at maybe the Spindler Rattlers, whoever come into this kind of realm of the next quarterback of, okay, how can we get this guy? And what do we already have on our team that can make this guy successful? I think that is a huge point. What you said is we watch these guys in college, and in college, they might have 2 first-round picks on the offensive line. They might have a first-round pick at tight end, 2 first-round picks at receiver. They might have those. They might not have any of them, but they have a system and they have comfort in that now they go and they find a way to succeed. Then they get to an NFL team and it can be totally different. What they had there, they don't have here. They have protection there. And you just talked about it with Sam Darnold. You have 0 protection. We talked about Daniel Jones. The last few years, he's running for his life out there. So you look at these teams and you look at a team like Denver. You have Sean Payton, who's an offensive guru, what he was able to do. It didn't work out with Russell Wilson. Now you have Jarrett Stidham on the roster. You don't have many guys there that have started. You have DiNucci there as well, but these guys haven't played a lot of meaningful football. So I look at this as, well, all right, wherever we end up, we can get a quarterback and we can say, hey, we'll have a competition. Which one of these quarterbacks or quarterbacks that Sean Payton is sitting there and saying, hey, I would love to work with this guy. I think I can make this guy X, Y, and Z. And I think that gives them an opportunity now to say, all right, we might not be exactly where we want, but we don't know that this guy's not going to be the quarterback of our future. You said it earlier. Pick 199, ended up becoming one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history, one of the best winners at quarterback we've ever seen. And he was picked 199. So I think sometimes we get so into this thinking like, all right, they have to settle for this quarterback because they're at 12 or they're at 13. But like, you don't know. Mahomes was the 11th pick in the draft for Kansas City. So maybe one of these guys go to Denver. Jarrett Stidham takes the lead. He goes out there. He's a poised vet. He's a good locker room guy. Got to be with him in New England. Always smiling, always upbeat, wants to get better. If a guy gets to learn what it means to be a pro in the NFL, Jarrett Stidham can show him that. And Jarrett Stidham can go play and ease that maybe transition for a guy. But that's what you have to battle. Because like you said earlier, these fan bases want to see this guy you get in the first round. So that's really hard not to go out there and play him. But I think Denver's going to have to make a decision of which one of these guys best fits Sean Payton. Because whatever we thought about Russell Wilson, it didn't fit Sean Payton. And a lot of us last year said, hey, Russ wasn't bad. Like he went out there and did some Russell Wilson type things. Didn't work with Sean Payton. So I think that's more important for Denver to find a quarterback that fits his style more than anything.
No doubt. And the thing you have to be careful of is sometimes you have this impression that, okay, the top three guys, okay, they go 1, 2, 3. They're the quarterbacks. If you pick a guy at 11, you pick a guy 16, you pick a guy in the 20s, you pick a guy in the second round, you pick a guy in the third round. You're almost saying to yourself, this is going to be our quarterback, right? Maybe less so the third round, but if you pick a guy in the first 2 rounds, you're really saying to your team that this is our next starting quarterback. It's just the nature of that position. So you better really like him. And if you feel like he's that guy, pull the trigger. If you feel like he's that guy, go move up and get him. But if you have questions about it, the guy I'm talking to played 13 years, went to plenty Pro Bowls, and won 3 Super Bowls, right? That guy is on the draft board too, right? That guy's going to help your team too at another position. True. So sometimes you get so enamored with it's the quarterback, and you talk yourself into stuff. There are blinking lights on the draft board. There are blinking lights at those other positions like take me. I'm really good. You're not going to have to address this position for a long time, you know? So taking those guys and not getting so enamored with this position and forcing yourself into a decision you really don't want to make, I think that's a critical part of this whole thing. Now, if you love them, you're convicted, go get them. I'm not saying that, but just be careful.
No, that makes a lot of sense, especially because you want to give the guys in the locker room that feeling, like you just said, when we draft a guy in the first round, that's our quarterback. But if you're all sitting there inside the staff meeting saying, but he's not that good, he's not going to get us over the top, then you're sending that false hope that in 2 years, you'll be right back in the same position, or whoever's making that decision on who to draft probably won't be in that position anymore, but this franchise will be back in that position. So, but I think that's what's interesting for Raiders, right? Because you decide, hey, we're going to give Antonio Pierce a chance to go be our next head coach. But now, what do you give him to allow him to be successful? Aiden O'Connell was out there last year. He got some starts under Josh McDaniels. I think Josh McDaniels saw something that he was like, hey, we're going to start this guy and give him an opportunity. But none of it really worked out the way that you thought. And then you say, okay, that's fine. And you go get Gardner Minshew. And I don't think enough's been talked about with Gardner Minshew, because all he did last year was go to Indy. Anthony Richardson gets hurt, and he gives them a chance to be out there and playing meaningful football in the AFC South. So if you're the Raiders and you're Jason Garrett, the head coach, what will you be thinking as now a new coach? You said it. You got to Dallas, first year there, you draft Tyron Smith, not a quarterback, not even, you draft a guy who becomes a staple for the Dallas Cowboys and one of the best left tackles in the NFL. What would you be thinking as if you were Antonio Pierce?
I don't think they've addressed their quarterback situation. I don't think they have the next Raider quarterback. Can Aiden O'Connell be that quarterback? He might be. Really impressed by him last year. Absolutely love Gardner Minshew. Love him. Love what he's done in the past in his career last year. Fantastic. But I think if you close that door and you pull back and you say, or either one of these guys, this marquee guy that is going to be our quarterback for the next 10 years, I don't know that you can say that with conviction about either of those guys. Do you want to give them a chance to do it? Sure. I have nothing against that. If they earn it, absolutely. We got to be honest. We got to watch and evaluate with our eyes and see what these guys can do. But I think ideally what they want is that cornerstone player. Patrick Mahomes is in the division. Justin Herbert's in the division. Denver's in the same conversation as the Raiders, understanding that they got these elite players playing for these division rivals. So I think heart of hearts, they want Jayden Daniels. He's the guy that Antonio has a relationship with, going all the way back to Arizona State. I think that could be their guy. And you'd say, hey, boom, fan base, team, organization, everybody's excited about that guy. Hard to get there. How do you get there? Right? You got to give up a lot to get there. Are they willing to do it? I don't know. But I think they've done a good job setting themselves up to have functional guys play for them this coming year. If they can't make a decision to get one of the marquee guys that they love, they can take a breath and say, hey, let's get our team better in other ways, and these guys can go. Aiden did enough for us. He won some games. Gardner won some games. Let's go. But I think in the back of their minds, they're saying, who's our next guy? I don't think we have them on the roster right now.
Yeah, I think that's so important when you look at the full dynamic of your team, of having a guy that players can say, hey, at least we can get behind this guy and go win some football games. You saw New England did that with Jacoby Brissett, a guy that players like, and you saw that with Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell. I think that's important. I think you need to have a feeling. And sometimes, like, it'll be interesting with Denver. You have all guys from last year. Like, what was the feeling in the locker room when those guys took the field at quarterback? Did they feel like, hey, that guy gives us a better chance to win other than Russell Wilson? Like, that to me is to be determined. Whereas I think sometimes these teams that go and at least bring somebody from the outside, is it going to be better? You have no idea. But I think it at least instills some hope in guys, especially on the other side of the ball, when you have guys like Max Crosby. You have guys out there playing their butts off, competing at such a high level from an effort standpoint, and then obviously from a playing standpoint, that they deserve and have earned a chance to have guys that can go out there and win games. So I agree with you 100%. That's a good thing to do to give themselves a chance to be competitive this year.
The other thing that's tricky when you don't have a guy at that position, it can sometimes create division on the team. Hey, the defense is getting it done. The offense, well, they got no chance. And all of a sudden there's this subtle divide that happens. And, obviously that's not where you want to be. You want to be everybody together, everybody pulling for each other, everybody believing in each other. But that idea of, hey, the defense is getting it done, teams is getting it done, those guys on offense. And if you don't have a trigger man who can rally the troops and play the game at a high level, sometimes that can create some divides on the team. You mentioned earlier about Sean Payton in Denver, and I played for Sean for 3 years and know him well. He's a good friend. The word you use is the exact right one, fit. He wants a guy who fits him. And Russell Wilson did do good things for them last year, but it wasn't the right fit. Sean's looking for a guy who's a surgeon like Drew Brees. And, that marriage they had in New Orleans for so many years, they were elite together. And that's what Sean wants from the position. And he just felt like at that point, it was worth it for them to, hey, I don't think this is ever going to be the marriage that we want. Let's move on. Let's take our medicine now. There's some salary cap implications and issues with this. I get it. But let's go find the next one. And let's not spend any more time in an environment that's not exactly how we want it to go. So he's looking for that guy who fits how he wants to play. And I wouldn't be surprised if Bo Nix wasn't in that conversation. Like, he's a real mature guy who approaches it the right way. And boy, he was awfully efficient playing this past year. So it was fun to watch him.
Yeah, it's going to be fun watching this draft come Thursday night. But just seeing the quarterbacks and how it goes, seems like they'll have less people in the green room for all of these antics and stuff that go on. And speaking of green room and craziness, I don't know this. I don't have a side of this, but craziest in-card moment of the draft. And like all this is happening, and people that don't know, I'm sure they do know if they're watching this, but the card is given, and that's how the draft is. You write it down on the card. It comes in on a phone call, whatever it is. And that card is like, it holds the future of the franchise. What's the craziest story you've ever had with that card?
It's a really fun environment to be in, the draft. And, one of the things that I've always been bothered by is there's a lot of conversations that go on in the draft process, the draft meetings that start, 3 weeks or a month before the draft. And you talk about so many different players, and sometimes stories come out where they say, oh, he didn't like him, or I can't believe he said that about him. And, oftentimes it's just, you're in those conversations and you're trying to stimulate thought, and you're trying to get people to be convicted about players. And if the guy was evaluating you coming out and somebody said, oh, this Devin McCourty out of Rutgers, I love him. Are you kidding me? You're telling me we're going to pick a guy who's 191 pounds and he's going to play corner and say, are you serious, McCourty?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you want the scout to say, damn right we are, because I'll tell you why. And he goes and goes and goes. And sometimes people say, oh, the coach didn't like him. He was challenging the scout or the coach to get the evaluation, to crystallize the evaluation. And that's always been one of the things that I thought was the most fun part of the whole thing, is that you battle back and forth on it. And then you get this consensus evaluation and say, you're damn right we want McCourty. Let's take him. And let's take him in the first round, and da-da-da-da-da. So I've always loved that part of it. We had one in 2014 that was really interesting. We needed to go defense. We had drafted Tyron Smith and we had drafted Travis Frederick to build up our offensive line in 2 of the last 3 years. And in 2014, we really felt like we got to go defense. And I believe how we had it was Anthony Barr was coming out, if you remember him, and Aaron Donald was coming out, and Ryan Shazier were coming out. And all these guys, I think we had picked 16, and we're like, hey, these are our guys right here. We think one of these 3 guys is going to be there. And so I think it was pick 11, Minnesota takes linebacker from UCLA, Anthony Barr. Like, oh, God, okay. Okay, Aaron Donald's our guy. Here he is. He's our guy, Pick 13, St. Louis Rams, Aaron Donald. Like, okay, we got Shazier. Okay, boom. I think it was pick 14, Pittsburgh Steelers, Ryan Shazier. So we're like, what are we doing? And if you remember, that was the draft that Johnny Manizel came out in. And, Jerry Jones had always loved the idea of, hey, it's Joe Montana to Steve Young. It's Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. The idea of, that next quarterback. And he was always forward thinking that way. And he really liked Johnny Manizel. But, we're talking about that blinking light. On the board is Zach Martin. Boom, boom, like blinking at us. He's the highest graded player by a long shot. Nobody's close. We thought he was going to be an incredible player. And, but again, we were focused more on defense. We love the defensive guys, but they're off the board now. And it's like, ding, 4-year starter at Notre Dame. He's one of the best players ever, one of the highest evals. But it's like, oh, hey, we've drafted offensive linemen in 2 of the last 3 years in the first round. Can we really do this? It's back and forth. It's all the way down to the wire. We got this Manziel thing going. And finally it was like, Jerry went around the room, who do you like? And everybody was like, Zach. Consensus, coaches, scouts, everybody. It's like, boom. And it turns out that he's only been an 8-time Pro Bowler and one of the best players in the history of the franchise. So, that was one of those where we thought we had a plan. It gets completely erased. We all look at each other, figure it out. We went back to the board, and it worked out for us.
I love how y'all set that up, even as a staff. That's how we used to do. Anytime we had to meet with Coach Belichick, it was like, all right, fellas, this is a game plan. When he asks us a question, we all say the same thing. So it's clean across the board, and that's how we get things done. So I love that. And I think that's great insight on that. I think so many people don't understand that. Like, the part of the scouting department in the NFL for an NFL team It's big, and everybody scouts and they have their own opinions. And then you meet back and you have this pick, and everybody has something. Hey, I like this guy, I like that guy. So it's not about me saying that this guy's a bad football player. It's me telling you, hey, I think he is a good player. But I'm telling you, I think this guy that I watch is a better player. And it's a back and forth. And I think that side of it doesn't come out. We just hear these stories. So and so said this because it's a great headline, but there's no context to what was going on in that moment. So I think that's great insight to how draft, not just the night of the draft, but leading up to the draft, each time teams call like that big meeting where everyone comes together and you start to iron out what your draft board looks like, who you fall in love with. Like that's hard to do. And I think people need to understand that, because how hard is it for people to decide where they want to go to eat when there's 5 people together? Like that's impossible to get done. And now you're talking about drafting the future of your franchise. So I think that's awesome to hear, man.
That's what I love. That's what I love the most about the draft. What was
Mhm.
being in those meetings, and you have different scouts who've scout different regions, different scouts who
Mhm.
scout position, the coaches who scout their positions. So all these guys, if you're the head coach, there's so many players in the draft, and each of these guys has expertise on a small subset of guys. And we're trying to
Mhm.
get to the bottom of them and line them up against each other. And so I used to love that part of it, where you're talking to a coach or to a scout and you're really challenging them. And you're really saying, like, I'm trying to understand why. And then you say,
Mhm.
okay, you told me this about this guy, but then you told me this about this guy. And it seems like it's the same thing. So why do you like this guy better? And
Mhm.
you're constantly just asking those questions and digging and just seeking understanding. And then the other guy says it, and then someone says something else. Do you see it that same way? And then you compare that. And okay, but remember the guy who came out last year? You told me that he was, and then how did he do? And so
Mhm.
it's like the huge investigation and then you overlay your own evaluation. I've watched the guys. This is my
Mhm.
opinion. What do you think about it? You know more than I do, but then you synthesize all that stuff and then you put it together as an organization. I just It's a really fun process, and it's the most critical process. The
Yeah.
NFL is about building teams. Period.
Yep.
The differentiation between and among the coaches, it's all like this. Now, there are some
Mhm.
elite coaches. We know that. I get that. But building the team, getting the right kind of guys together who fit the vision for the coach and for the organization, those are the teams that win. And when there's great
Yep.
alignment in all of that, those are the teams that have the best chance year after year. And I think we know who they are. So I think that's what
Mhm.
everybody's striving for.
Yeah, I don't have any draft day stories of being in the room, but today, April 22nd, I was drafted in 2010 to the New England Patriots. So shout out social media. I only remember that because somebody tags me in a post and says on this day, Devin McCourty was drafted 27th overall. So awesome surprise
They
for
made a hell of a
me.
pick, man.
And it was awesome for me because I was shocked when New England drafted me, because me and Coach Belichick sat down for like an hour watching film, and I couldn't tell you. I don't know if I've had only session I had with a coach watching film that was worse than that was when I met with Bill my second year when he was telling me how bad I was playing. But this was a weird session of we sat down, we watched film. He was like, "What could you have done better?" I would explain. Okay, watch the next play. What can you do better? Explain, move on. What is this guy doing? I would say it. I don't know if he thinks I'm saying it right, if I'm wrong. Sat down for an hour like that, back and forth. So when the Patriots drafted me, I remember calling my agent after that meeting. I was like, "Hey, I don't know how that meeting went. I don't know. I don't know if he liked me. We didn't talk about anything like how you doing or what do you like." I said, "We didn't talk about any of that, only film." And it was just me talking and him basically just saying okay or asking questions. So, and it was cool to see when I was there for a few years, he ranked me like right behind watching film with a college prospect behind Ed Reed and Ray Lewis, which was pretty cool. And I had an advantage. I was in school for 4.5 years, so I had plenty of time to study. But uh, it's fun thinking back to that time of the nerves and all of the excitement of the draft day. And now, being retired and looking back like, dang, 2010, that was a long time ago, but I enjoyed every minute of it, man. So happy, man. It's
As
my
fun as it was for
anniversary.
you, no, as fun as it was for you, you look back at those picks, they're decisions
Mhm.
that you make and you reflect back on, could have gone a lot of different ways. I mean, there are other players on the
Mhm.
board at 27 they could go, and they all looked at each other and say, let's take McCourty. And trust me, you were unbelievable for them for so long and represented everything that organization was, man. So it was a hell of a pick by them. They're equally happy, trust me.
I appreciate it, man. Hey, Jason, like always, I love anytime we get together and talk ball. I always learn so much from you from a player perspective and coach perspective, man. Good to see you. I hope you're enjoying Texas.
Yeah, thanks, Dev. Can't wait to see you, bud.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.